What's up, everybody? So we're out in the shop, and today we are going to be working on a Go-Mai billet. Now, this is going to be what I hope to be a two-part series, but we'll see how that goes. What we're going to be working on is a Go-Mai that is 1080 and 15N20. Now, the whole point behind the Go-Mai versus a Sanmai is a Sanmai is a 3-layered knife. A Go-Mai is 5 layers. So we're going to be doing the layers to where it's 1080 in the center. That's going to be sandwiched by 15N20, and that's going to be sandwiched with another layer of 1080 on either side. That's going to be the layers we are going to be working with. We did already make a billet, and then that was not successful. I talked about it in a couple of the previous videos where we did not get a good forge weld. I'll go into a little more detail when we start doing the voiceover, but just know that you need to be prepared for forge welding a thing before you start. My issue, ran out of propane whenever I started it. Forge got too cold. Ended up letting a little bit of forge scale build up in the layers. Chased it. Could not correct it. It is what it is. It was a blessing in disguise because that particular knife did not have a very good heat treat, and it would not have been a very successful knife in the first place, so it was a blessing in disguise. But we now know what to do to correct this, and we're going to work on that in this video. Hopefully y'all have a lot of takeaways from this, and hopefully y'all enjoy it. It's going to be a little bit longer video, but it's got a lot of good information, and I hope that y'all just enjoy the whole forging process. And there you go, guys. Let's go ahead, let's jump into this, let's get this thing knocked out.
So we're going to start off with the 2x72 using a 80 grit belt to just clean our steel. So starting with clean steel is the first way you want to start and have the best forge weld possible. So like I said, I'm just using an 80 grit belt, and I'm just cleaning each piece as we go along. And then we're going to be using acetone to clean off any oils that might be on there. And as we're cleaning these, we're just going to be stacking them in our vise that we have right here. And this is just a drill press vise. I don't tend to use it on my drill press ever, so I'm going to go ahead and use it for this. I'm going to end up welding these together, and I'm not really that worried about getting any type of weld debris on this particular vise clamp right here. So got them all stacked together. We're going to go ahead and weld each corner plus down the center of each of these. I'm definitely not the best welder in the world, but I can make welds go where I want them, and that's good enough for me. I'm going to go ahead and weld on our rod, and this is what we're going to be holding as we're forging this together. And then I went through and I'm showing you the mistake that I had. If you hear the forge right now, it's kind of sputtering. I was hoping to be able to get flux on here, this is just borax, so that I could keep everything clean enough while I ran and got another tank of propane. And luckily the forge stayed on a little bit, you know, the whole entire time I was gone, but it was just a little too late. So I had to go and do that, and then it ended up not working, and I had to start with a completely different billet. But this is the new billet. We made sure that we had plenty of propane to do this, and we're just taking our time right here and doing pretty soft hammer blows to try and set those welds. As I go through this process, I am fluxing in between each one of these So I did that slight hammering, then I fluxed it, put it in the forge, got it back up to temperature, brought it out, cleaned it, and then hammered a little bit more with a little bit more force behind it this time. And I'm going to gradually start building up that force as we're really getting that forge weld to stick. And for the first 5-6 rounds of this, I will be fluxing in between each time I start forging. So what I'm really focusing on here again is just taking my time. I'm not trying to move steel right now. I'm just trying to make sure that I have absolutely forge welded steel. Because the last thing I want is to put all the effort into this again just for another failure. I'm just taking my time and making sure everything's good. And then once I feel confident, that's whenever I start getting after it and putting some force behind it. Now, my goal with this is to get to a point to where I just have a nice billet. I'm not trying to forge this out just yet. So you'll see in a little bit my shirt changes color, and I'll tell you whenever that happens. But while I have this rod attached, I'm just going through and keeping everything square, keeping the layers where I want them, and I'm just creating a decent, like I said, a decent chunk of steel so that I can end up forging that piece out. And what I did was I forged this chunk, and then I paused, cleaned it up. So I took all of those welds that we did around the outside and ground those off, so I wasn't forging any of that back into the steel. What I'm doing right here, now that my shirt's changed, this is a completely different day, and I'm using these 2 pieces of steel to heat up the top of my anvil, because it was about 25 degrees, 30 degrees outside while I'm doing this, and that anvil was really cold. And if you have a cold anvil, it's going to start sucking the heat out of the steel that you're trying to forge, and you're not going to be able to work with it as long. So you want to heat up your anvil to make sure that it's not cooling your steel, and you get a little bit more forging time. So at this point, what we're doing is we're going to start drawing this piece out, and as we start speeding up, you'll start seeing what I'm doing. But what I'm focusing on right now is I'm hammering in the center and then hammering from the center to the outside, center to the outside. And I'm starting in the center each time I do that, so that I'm pushing the steel towards the end. Same thing whenever I have it up on its side right there. I'm starting in the center and I'm hammering towards the outside, so that we can start drawing out this piece of steel. And you'll see it start gradually growing. And what I'm doing is I am forging it down to about 1.25 inches by about 3/8 of an inch to about 5 inches long. And then I'm going to start making it a little bit thinner and keeping that 1.25 inches until I get to where I want it to be. And then I'm going to start thinning it out to where it's going to be about just over 1.25 inches by 3/16 of an inch thick by 7.25 inches long. That is my goal. And what I did was I measured spots on my anvil that way I knew exactly where to go to. So from my notch right there where I have the end of that steel all the way back to the back end of my hardy hole, that is 7.25 inches, and that is what I'm trying to draw it out to. And then I measured between the side of my anvil and the hardy hole, and that is exactly 1.25 inches. So I'm using those 2 spots to be able to know how far I need to draw. And you can see right here, I still have a little bit to go, but it is gradually pulling out, and I'm just going to keep repeating the process, forging from the center to the outside on both having it vertical and horizontal. And the goal with this is just to gradually do it. I mean, there's no real fast way to do this when you're doing it by hand, but it was definitely some work, and it was a good workout, that's for sure. I will definitely say that I absolutely need to get some real, actual, bladesmith / blacksmith tongs. I think it's about time to go ahead and get some of those. And as you can see, I am not really working the steel whenever it starts cooling down. My goal is keep this pretty hot. As soon as the color starts coming out of it, I'm going to go ahead and put it back in the forge, heat it back up, because if you're doing this by hand, you need to make sure you have nice hot steel the whole entire time. If not, you're just putting so much work into it and you're not getting anything out of it. And if you're wondering what hammer I'm using right here, this is a 2 1/4 pound rounding hammer. It is one of my only forging tools that I actually had made for me, and I absolutely love this thing. It's worked out really well with pretty much everything I've forged from this up to this point. And you can see here where I'm measuring how much further I need to go. It's pretty much good where it's at, but I need to go just a little bit further on this. Remeasuring, making sure I know exactly where I need to be. And then I just focus on drawing it just a little bit further. I needed to get about another 1/2 inch out of it in length. So that's what I'm working on right now. And I was still a little bit thick, so I had some metal to move where I needed it to go. And the big thing that I'm focusing on while I'm doing this is making sure that I'm controlling my hammer, because I'm putting some pretty hard swings on this. And I don't want to put a bunch of divots in the steel, and I don't want to shift my layers to one side or the other. So the goal is stretch this out, but keep everything where it's supposed to be. So you're really focusing on hammer control on this, which is kind of rough because of how long you go through forging with this. Now this is my little auto body hammer. A few people had asked about this. It is what it is. It's a auto body hammer that I've had for about 20 years, and it is really the perfect tool to be able to flatten everything where I want it and make sure that I have a nice flat piece of steel. And this actually turned out very, very flat, which I'm really happy for because I've only done this a few times and this was a very good outcome. We're going to go ahead and normalize 3 times. So put it in the forge, bring it up to temperature, pull it out of the forge, sit it down. I did that 3 times just to, you know, take a lot of the stress out of the steel from all the forging. And then right here we are drawing our outline of our bar that we have so that we can kind of decide what shape we want to do. And what I'm using here, this is the template for the knife that was the failure that I tried first. And I really liked this shape and I kind of wanted to do something similar to it. So I made it fit this piece of steel that we just forged. Now, one of the things that I did was I kind of changed the profile a little bit, because this piece of steel was about almost 1/4 of an inch shorter than the first piece of steel that I had made. But I also did the shape and then thought about it and decided to end up going with a finger choil, because whenever I cut out this piece of paper and put it in my hand, it felt a little weird. But that's the whole point behind drawing it and then cutting it out so that you can see how it feels in your hand. And if you have time to make a template on a piece of wood, I would do that as well. But I held it and it didn't feel right. It needed a little extra something. So that's why I decided to go ahead and do a finger choil. Now, when it comes to cutting this out on the porter bandsaw, I did have all the footage of cutting the whole entire thing out, but as you can see, it spent most of its time focused on the top of the porter bandsaw and not so much time focused on the steel that I was cutting. So I figured I would show a portion of it, but that's about it, because most of the rest of it was focused right there on the top of that porter bandsaw. Now I'm using a 40 grit belt here just to go through and smooth out a lot of the rough shapes from cutting this out on the porter bandsaw. Now the reason why I decided to cut it out instead of forging this to shape, 2 reasons. 1, I didn't want to risk messing up my welds. 2, I also didn't want to shift my center core to one side or the other. I knew that it was already centered, so I wanted to go ahead and have the best chance at success here. Now we're just grinding it smooth on both sides. I'm taking it down just a little bit. I barely had to grind anything off on here because it was already really flat. Once we got that done, we're going to go ahead and do a little test etch on this to make sure, again, that our layers are exactly where we want them. I had it in there for about maybe 2-3 minutes. That's all I really wanted to have it in there for, but you can see here that we have nice even layers all the way down it. I know it doesn't stand out very much right now, but whenever we start grinding the bevels in, we're going to get a nice look.
Alright guys, let's actually go ahead and end this vlog here. I want to recap about a couple of things, okay? So we had a failure, we learned from that failure, and turned out a so far successful knife. So far. But we learned from that failure, and that is all of this stuff that is right here. This awesomeness. Now, because of that failure, we were able to pump out this knife. Now this is a different shape than that original shape. This is what we have right here. I haven't done a finger choil in a while, so I wanted to go ahead and do one on this. but we have a nice solid knife. I haven't been able to see any noticeable delam areas or anything like that, and it's all where it needs to be. You can't really see it that well, but there are all the layers right here, and there's a little line that goes all the way down this little area where you can see that is that center layer. It is perfectly even all the way down. The knife, which is always the goal for a Go-Mai. Now, I originally was going to go ahead and grind this completely flat and get rid of all of this, but it is actually super flat right now, even though you can see some of this stuff. This is really shallow. I wanted to go ahead and actually leave some of this on here. Now, it's not going to hinder the look of the Go-Mai because this little hammer forged area on both sides is just going to be on the ricasso. There's no bevels in that area. It's completely flat, so you wouldn't actually see any of the Go-Mai awesomeness in that area anyways. Where you actually are going to see the bevels and you're going to see those layers, all that's going to be super smooth. There's not going to be any hammer forged area in that. This is just going to be a little extra design with the overall look of the knife, and I think it's going to look pretty cool. But when it comes to this particular knife, the reason why I am not doing a two-part series like I originally set out to do is because I wanted to give y'all all of the information that is in this video. So I had a lot of failure and success doing this Go-Mai build, and hopefully you learned a little bit from the beginning where I was talking about what went wrong and what I corrected on this one. Now, it's just one of those things where, again, you got to learn from your mistakes, learn from your failures, and do something awesome with them. Don't let them deflate you. Don't let them get you down. I am excited about this. So far, I feel like we are going to have a nice, successful build here. What we're going to be doing in the next video is we're going to go ahead and heat treat and temper this. First, we're going to end up drilling holes through here, but then we're going to heat treat and temper before we do our bevels. So we're going to have a little bit of things we're going to have to focus on there because we got to keep the blade cool the entire time we're doing the bevels so that we don't mess up our hardness. Now, we're going to have heat treat, temper, bevels. We're going to go ahead and maker's mark, acid etch the knife, do all of that stuff in that next video. Get into good detail on that, and then the last video is going to be getting the handle scales set up, shaping the handle scales, and then getting an edge on it, doing all of that stuff all in one video. So it'll be 3 parts, good info with some awesome Go-Mai-ness. So hopefully y'all are ready for all the stuff that's going to be going on here. Now, typically I would start doing my outro, but a lot of y'all start, just not paying attention whenever that happens. So what I want to mention is there is a good chance that in the near future we're going to be doing a giveaway again. So, make sure that you actually share this video with your friends and family. Tell them to subscribe. If you haven't subscribed yet, you should subscribe. You should turn on the notifications bell. You should give this video a thumbs up. You should definitely do that because there's probably a number that's coming up in the near future that's going to go, yep, that's the marker. We're going to do a giveaway. So just be on the lookout for that. Guys, thank y'all for coming by. Thank y'all for spending your time with me. Hopefully y'all are pumped about this series. And of course, the Damascus series that's going to be coming up. Y'all have an amazing day. Y'all stay safe out there. I'll catch y'all next time.